This is every single book I read in 2024. The stack is a bit smaller than it was last year because the first like 6 months of 2024 I was just so incredibly busy. I don't think I read a single book. So this is more like the second half of 2024 reading. I've gone through and I've ranked all the books that I read from worst to best books because there's been a few like 5-star books, but a couple that were just like so horrible I honestly regretted even reading them. I saw a video just like this a couple weeks ago and I thought it was so interesting to see because I always like to watch book review videos to kind of like get me excited to read a new book or to steer me away from books that are kind of overhyped. So I thought I would rank all of the books that I read this year, and also it's a good way to wrap up the year since it's currently December 23rd. I don't know when I'm going to post this, but probably in the next couple days. I'm starting off with my 5 lowest ranking books. This one is by far my lowest ranking book. This is Reckless by Lauren Roberts. It's the second book of the Powerless trilogy. I absolutely loved the first book. I thought it was so like Hunger Games-esque with fantasy elements and a romance, but that wasn't like the whole plot. There was also like a lot of the politics was like the main point of the story, and then there was like little subplots of romance that I thought were really interesting. And so I was super excited for this book because it's like a love triangle between 2 brothers and this girl. This book was a complete flop for me. Like, I didn't like it at all. I thought the book could have been done in like 100 pages, to be honest. I think they repeated themselves so much. It was actually insane. I feel like I reread the exact same scene 5 times within the book, and I think they were trying to play at the romance aspect of it, but it just like they weren't being creative with it. And there was like a plot twist at the end, which most people said that they already saw coming. I personally didn't, but I don't feel like I try really hard to figure out plot lines before they happen because I kind of like the surprise of a book. The plot line at the end is interesting, and I'm curious on how she's gonna do it for the 3rd book, so I am gonna read the 3rd book. But honestly, I would just, if you read the first book, I would maybe read the first like 50 pages of this book and the last 50 pages, and you can kind of skip the entire middle. Like, nothing happens at all that's interesting. And then I'm gonna read the 3rd book because I do still want to figure out what happens with the characters, but I just don't really, I personally didn't like this book at all. Honestly, now that I'm re-looking at my stack, I don't think I have very many books other than Reckless that I just really didn't like. The rest of them were just kind of just not 5 stars, you know, like they could have been better, but they weren't bad, if that makes sense. So the next book I have is A Certain Hunger by Chelsea Summers. This one was really interesting. This is about a murderer, and also it's like she's a cannibal. I think the entire book was trying to be like symbolic of feminism and just like women power, but honestly it was just weird. That's like the best way I can describe this book. It was just super weird, pretty graphic, and I don't know, it left me like what, like kind of speechless. Actual storyline and the plot was not very interesting. The way that it was written, I was just kind of shocked the entire time. I guess I would rate it like 2 stars. I just based on what I'm saying right now, you can tell I have like nothing to say about this book. Like, I have no idea what even happened. I don't know. I wouldn't recommend it. It's just kind of weird. Next book. This is Rogue by Mona Adwad, and this is the 2nd book I've read of hers. The first one I read before this, and this, so I read Bunny, and I'm ranking that higher, so that's why I haven't shown it yet, and I really like that book. So then I got Rogue because I was like, oh, maybe the author, like sometimes when I really like a book, I will try to read the author's other novels because I'm assuming that it's gonna be the same level of good to me. That made no sense, but you know what I mean. And so I got Rogue, and it's basically a tale of Hollywood and the beauty industry and how some women like take it so far because society just wants you to be beautiful and wants you to stay young. Basically the dark evil side of the beauty industry. It's kind of cult-esque, and I think the concept of this book is so good, like so good. I think it could be one of like, if they produce it into a movie, it could be a fabulous movie. I honestly am only ranking this book this low because of the ending. The ending just is so boring. Like, the whole book was like, wow, this is gonna be like, I know that the ending's gonna be so good. It has to be. The plot was so good. All of like the elements and the people, there was just a lot of plot holes. Like, a lot of important characters didn't get an ending, which makes no sense to me. And the ending itself with the main character was just kind of 2 pages, bam, done. And I was upset by that because I think the plot and the rest of the book was so good. I wish the ending was better. So that's why I'm ranking it so low. So I'm giving this like a 2.5 because the idea is so good. Honestly, if the ending was better, I'd probably give this book like a 4. The ending ruined it for me, sadly. So 2.5. Next book. This was my first sci-fi book. This is Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I actually read this because Haley, what's her last name? She's like a book YouTuber, Haley Pham, I think. I always watch her videos to get like inspiration for books. And in one of her older videos, she was reading Red Rising. And I've never read sci-fi novels before, but the way she described it was really interesting to me. I don't know how to describe it. I don't want to keep saying Hunger Games. It's dystopian. It's a dystopian future of different levels and hierarchies that are based on your color, like what you were born into. The tops are golds and silvers and then bronze, and then it goes to like purple, blue, whatever. But the lowest tier is the reds. And it reminds me of Hunger Games for the reason that the golds like have no idea how badly the reds are treated in society. Just kind of how in Hunger Games, the top part of society just is so, everything's propaganda. They have like really no idea what's going on. They have so much luxury, so much food, so much wine, everything. And they have no idea that the people in the lower class just are so poor, struggling to survive. And that's kind of what this reminds me of. This is a whole kind of scheme of one of the lower reds trying to break into the gold's society. And he's trying to like break this whole hierarchy and fix the system. And I thought that it was such a good book. It is so well written. There's 4 other books I believe in this series, and I haven't gotten to them yet. I'm rating this a little bit lower because normally I've read a couple of series before, and when I finish a book, I'm expecting to like grab my keys, get in the car, and instantly drive to Barnes & Noble and buy the next book. Like that's how I want to feel when I finish a book in a series. And when I finished this, even though it is such a good book, I didn't get that feeling at all. And maybe it's just because it's sci-fi or the first book's kind of a lot of setup. It didn't leave me on like a huge cliffhanger at all to like want to go read the next book. And I think that I will eventually, but I'm just in no rush currently. I'd rather read other books right now. Probably gonna rate this like a 3 stars. The plot is so good. The world building's great. I do really want to finish this series and I highly recommend it. 3 stars. This book was actually recommended to me by my parents. I went to Barnes & Noble with them because my dad is a really big reader and he's kind of, we like recommend books to each other. And this is Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. Very famous book. Has a whole movie now, and I did watch the movie after this. I love dark vampire red, that in a book, if that makes any sense. That vibe in a book, like castles, all of that is my exact vibe. That's my favorite kind of trope in whatever to read. And so I thought that this was gonna be that, and it is pretty much that. I think it was just really hard because my first critique, there are no chapters. There's like, I think part 1, part 2, and part 3, but there's no chapters in this book, and I can like finish a book pretty fast. Like on average, I think I finish my books within like 2 or 3 days if I'm really into them. And this one kind of took me a long time because normally I'll be reading, I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna read 1 chapter, and then I like check out the next chapter and it's like 7 pages, and like, okay, I'll read 1 more chapter, and then I keep doing that every single day till the book's done. And because this didn't have any chapters in it, I was like, oh my god, there's like 70 more pages until I'm like at the next break. So I kept having to stop at like random parts in the book. And then when I would get back into the book a couple days later, I'd have to like reread that page because I didn't really know where I left off. And I personally do not like books that don't have chapters. They don't have to be like crazy short or anything. But even if the chapter is like 30 pages, I like appreciate this section. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. That's personal. That has nothing to do with the actual book. My only other critique on this book is that it was really slow. Really slow. I thought it was super interesting. I love the storyline. I watched the movie, but even the movie is really slow. I was watching it with my roommate Danny, and she didn't read the book. She was like, I can't believe you read this book if the movie is that slow. Like, I imagine that the book is even slower, which it is. I think it took me like a month to read, which is a pretty long time for me, but I did like it. 3 stars as well. It wasn't anything crazy. I like am not very good at hyping these books up. I'm kind of like critiquing these really hard. These are my lowest 5 books. So now we're gonna move on to my middle section book. I actually bought this book. This is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson. I bought this book like 4 years ago. I was gonna do like a book club thingy with one of my friends, and then we both just like didn't want to read it, and then I think I read like 20 pages and then put the book down. I didn't touch it for like 4 years. And I have probably like 8 books on my shelf right now that are books that I tried to read and just could not get into them, so I just left them there. And I was trying to save money like a couple months ago. I was like, okay, I'm gonna read one of the books that I already bought, because I'm like looking at these and like every single one of these is $20, you know what I mean? Looking at my shelf with a wasted $100 because I never actually gave the book a shot. So I picked it back up, And this is a pretty hefty book, almost 600 pages. I was able to get through this book so fast because I would go walk on the treadmill for like an hour and I'd put on the audiobook because this has really long chapters. I think every chapter takes me like about 45 to an hour to read. And so I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna go listen to one chapter of the book. And then it'd get me hooked because I was like doing something else, but also like being able to listen to the book. And then I'd come home and like keep reading it physically. I would honestly say this is like one of the best books I read this year. It's in the top 5. This is a murder mystery. The book starts off with like this murder of this girl that happened like 40 years ago, or like she went missing. It's not like clarified that it was a murder, but everyone thinks she was murdered. The girl with the dragon tattoo is actually like a side character. She's not like the main, she is like one of the main characters, but the plot is not about her, if that makes sense. This older guy who's like a detective, and the two of them are like trying to figure out this case from like 40 years ago. And it's honestly really dark. I haven't watched the movie yet. I want to, but there's like scenes towards the end of like when the twists unfold and everything, and they're really, really dark and pretty graphic, I would say. I've seen that a lot of people don't like this book because of that, but if that's not something that's gonna steer you away to it, it does add like suspense and it adds to the plot, but it's just a really dark subject. And then overall, I think the plot line is so good. I did not see any of the twists coming at all. It has dark elements. It's well written. I think the length is perfect for adding in all the little details. Like at the end, there's so many plots in this book, and they wrap it up so well. I would give this book probably 4 stars. Okay, this is another one of those books that was sitting on my shelf for like 2 years, and I forced myself to pick it back up, but I'm very glad I did. This was supposed to go in front of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, but this is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. Interesting, if you've ever read George Orwell's 1984, I actually almost fully read that book. I think I have 50 pages left in that book, which is like so upsetting. Why didn't I finish it? I don't know. I would have been in this pile if I just finished it. That book is actually inspired by this book. The author, Aldous Huxley, was actually George Orwell's professor at some point. I looked this up online because the books are very similar, like very, very similar. And I was kind of like who copied who type beat, but they didn't. They were inspired by each other because they actually personally knew each other. This is like a dystopian future where there's no couples. That doesn't exist. Everyone belongs to each other. Babies are like created in labs in these little bottles. No one grows old. Everyone stays like 20 years old for like the rest of their life. There's like different levels, like beta, gamma, alpha, whatever. And there's a lot of elements in this book that are so interesting because it was written in like, I think, yeah, like 1950 or something. When all of these different levels, like take for example the beta, are sleeping, they're like getting told things by little radios like, you will be a beta for the rest of your life. You'll never want to be an alpha. You love being a beta. You will follow the rules. You will do the, you know what I mean? It's like programming their brain while they sleep, and they're given programs like this until they're like 16 years old. So all the people that are in this society are fully okay with it, and they like accept it and they love it. And they're given, what's it called? I read this, what's it called? It's not Sigma, but for some reason I want to say Sigma. They're given this pill that they call Sigma, I'm gonna say, because I don't remember. And it's basically like they call it a vacation. Like when the people get really stressed out, they'll like take 2 pills and it'll mentally give them a vacation for like 2 weeks. Actually only been like an hour or 2, and then they'll come back into reality and be able to work and do their societal duties. And it feels like they just went on vacation. Or like anytime anything weird happens, like for example, they really do not like the idea of mothers and fathers. That like grosses them out because they've just been taught that. So in part of the book, someone brings up like a mother, like a biological mother, and they like all freak out and like take their pills because they just like don't like to think about anything that they're not supposed to think about. They're so wired to be in this society and just be like good little citizens. Without exposing the plot, I realize I'm kind of just telling you everything here. The book is basically about how the government can train you so well to think a certain way that you will never believe that what you are currently doing is wrong. And you will see other things that to us seem normal because we live the normal life. When we read this book, we're like, why would they ever think that? But they've only ever known that their entire life. So it's pretty interesting on like the government aspect, and it explains it from the government's point of view. Like one of the higher officials explains how he is controlling everyone. And it's kind of like a scary book to put into perspective of nowadays. This book also has a lot of weird things in the book, and I can understand why the author put them in the book because it is meant to make us uncomfortable. but a lot of people critique this book, and it used to be taught in schools and it's not taught in schools anymore because it's really like gross to our, it's gross. It is a gross, they have gross things in this book and people don't like that, and I don't like it, but I see why it's in the book. It's to prove a point of how we can be conditioned to think that even the grossest things are okay. I think this is good to like food for thought type book. 3 stars. I kind of went on a little tangent on this, to be honest. This is a hefty book. I think this is my biggest book that I read, and it's, I'm pretty sure, like 700 pages. It's 600 pages. And I read it in one day. And I think this is the biggest book that I've read in start to finish one day. And I kind of regret it. It was so good, which is why I read it in one day. But I think that if I would have taken even like a week to read it, the characters would have really resonated with me more, and the whole concept of the book would have sat with me. And it's a sad book, and it would have made it even better, I think, if I would have taken my time instead of rushing it. A fictional story of a family in World War II. My camera stopped. One of the daughters becomes a spy, and she's trying to fight against the Nazis secretly without like getting her and her whole family sent to like concentration camps or just murdered flat out. And it's a really, really impactful and crazy story. I love how they wrap it up. It kind of jumps from the future to the past over and over again. And there's 2 sisters and also a daughter from like the past. And when it jumps to the future, it's like an older lady with her son, and you don't know either which sister or the daughter. You don't know which one of them is the older lady. And so it keeps jumping back and forth, and the entire book you're trying to figure out like, okay, it has to be her. Oh wait, no, it's gonna be her, you know? It is such a good book, and it's so sad. I finished this book, even though I only read it one day, it like still hit me hard. Like I was laying in my bed, and all of my roommates, like I kind of go through like little, maybe once a month, I'll just binge read like nonstop. And they like know to just leave me alone in my room to read. And they kept like coming in here to check on me, like, do you need anything? Like, do you need food? Do you need like water? And I was like, no, I'm fine, I'm fine. And I was like bawling my eyes out. Like for probably the last 50 pages, I was just hysterically crying. And I love when books do that. I think I've only ever had 2 other books make me like fully cry. And sometimes you just need a really good cry. And if you're wanting to bawl your eyes out, I never even told you the title. This is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. She has a lot of books, and this is the only one I've ever read from her, but I've been recommended before. The Road, I think it's called The Road, or something similar to The Road. And I think that's the next book I want to read by her. She's a highly rated author. I think I would give this book 5 stars. Like fully, this was such a good book. Honestly, just interesting too about the history of our world. I feel like I took for granted so much in high school and middle school to be learning about our history. I just like don't even know anything, like at all. And so being able to read this in a fictional sense kind of just like puts me into that world for a little bit, and I get to actually learn something I should have already known, as well as an interesting plot and story. And so I highly recommend this. Apparently it's getting turned into a movie, so I'm really excited about that because it's so good. It's one of the best books I read this year by far. This one should have been below that one, but it's okay. This is Bunny by Mona Adwad. This is the same author as Rogue, and this is what made me want to go read another one of her books. This one honestly is so 50-50 with people. I always go into Goodreads after I finish a book, and I always go and look at the reviews once I finish the book to see if people thought similarly to me or if they had like completely different opinions. And this book is so 50-50. Some people absolutely hate this book, and then some people really appreciate it, and I personally really like it. I think that it's so, I can see why it's annoying. It's like about a cult kind of thing, like a group of popular girls in college, and the way they speak to each other is so fucking annoying. So like I fully understand, like you're just like, oh my god, I can't believe that. Like sometimes I like had to skip certain parts because they're just like, they talk like, oh my god, hi bunny, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, I love your skirt, oh my god, look at my lip gloss. Like that's how she writes them in this book, but it's on purpose. Like I see the reason behind it. This book is so interesting to me. The ending of this book had me like jaw drop. Oh my god, the ending, I was floored. Never would have seen it coming. Was so confused. I was so confused during this book. And I think I was like 40 pages to the finish and was genuinely sitting there like, I have no idea how this book's gonna end. And I absolutely love that. I love when I try to figure it out and I physically cannot, because it's so creative. The ending of this just blew my mind entirely. Sometimes I think it blew my mind too much where maybe I read it wrong. Like maybe I interpreted it wrong. So if you've read this, low-key let me know, because maybe I'm too creative. Maybe I read through the lines too much, maybe. I loved this book. I thought it was so good. I would rate it a 4 star. This is The Godfather, super famous book slash movie. I was really intimidated to read this because I've never seen the movie, but I also thought that's more of a reason to read it before I see the movie. And I've never even seen little clips of it. I had no idea what had happened in this movie at all. I was hooked in this book within 10 seconds, or 10 pages. This is so well written. Every little detail, every little aspect. I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I absolutely love this book. I haven't read or I haven't watched the movie yet, and I really want to, but I'm waiting for my roommate because she wants to watch it with me. I can 100% see how this is a classic, or it is a classic, right? Yeah, and I can see why it's such a famous story. Like the whole plot line, everything, love. My brain is like starting to forget like how to talk. Live, Laugh, Love, The Godfather, 5 stars. This was the very first book I read this year. I started it actually in 2023. And I think it's because I have a video similar to this, yeah, I have a video, but I don't think I ranked them like best to worst, but I made a video about all the books I read in 2023. I read so many more books that year, but I was ending 2023 finishing this book, and then I finished it in 2024, so I'm adding it to this pile. This is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. So good. I like, oh my god, I'm obsessed with this book. This book got me into like dark academia, university, cult, and since I've read like a lot of books that are cult, dark academia, I love this book so much. I've never understood how people are like, I want to read a book. Don't get it. Never have. What do you mean? You know, I just spent 14 hours reading this book. What do you mean you want to reread it? You know, you already know everything that happens. But I want to reread this book, which is crazy to say. I fully want to reread this book. There are so many things I think I missed during reading it, because I went on TikTok and I was like, The Secret History, plots, blah, 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 you know, for like 3 hours once I finished reading this book. I was like, oh my god, I didn't even realize that. Like, or like, there's a bunch of quotes that are in, I want to say Greek. Yeah, there's a bunch of Greek quotes in here. And me stupid and lazy, I didn't look up the quotes. Which, what? Like, I was just like, skip, probably not important, what? And so I want to reread because I missed all these tiny little quotes in there that probably added so much to the plot. And when I was on TikTok, I like read one of them and there was a translation. I was like, oh, you know, like, why the fuck didn't I read the book? Why didn't I try harder? This book is so good. It like left me questioning things. Like, it left me like, and if you've read this book, right, yeah, 5 stars. Lastly, this book I read because of this book. Same exact vibe, dark academia, set in a university, kind of giving cult vibes. This is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This book I've seen every time I walk into like Barnes & Noble, sitting on a little table, and I keep reading the back and I'm like, that sounds kind of good. And then I just never fucking picked it up for some reason. And I finally, this is probably, I read this like maybe a month ago. So good. Like, speechless. So good. What's up with all these Richards? If you've read these books, what's up with Richard? This one, okay, this book is like about a bunch of theater students in this art school. They all love Shakespeare. There's a ton of Shakespeare quotes in here. I'm putting on all of these plays. It's about a group of 7 like best friends that all are in the theater senior program. One of them died. It's a murder and you don't know who did it. And so the entire book, okay, also, sorry, I'm rambling. The main character's name is Oliver, and Oliver's in prison, first page, okay? And it's like 10 years into the future. Oliver's in prison, and he's telling a detective like his story about what happened 10 years previously. He was put in jail for the murder of this person. He never like fully ever told the police like what actually happened. He's about to be released from prison. One of the detectives that had been working with him since he was like 17 or 18 years old when the murder first happened, he was like, hey, I'm resigning. I'm not gonna work here anymore. Off the record, tell me what happened, because like this has been like my livelihood and I don't know what actually happened ever. Like, I know you're in prison, but like I don't actually know the story, you know? And so Oliver, it keeps jumping back into the future of Oliver telling this detective the full story, and then it would jump back into the past of when he was living the story. So much drama, so many fights, so many drugs, parties, everything. Then you find out at the end, obviously. And I was like, oh, floored. And then, oh my god, and then so you find out at the end, and then at the end there was another plot twist. and it's so sad. I forgot about it. It's just like I just re-reminded myself, and it's sad, and I bawled my eyes out. And then there's another plot twist. 5 stars. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you were entertained by me rambling. I kind of am so bad at describing books. I'm sorry. I'm only good at describing books if I can tell you like start to finish everything. But like I can't leave out, like I don't know what to leave out. I don't know what is actual plot or what is like that was the main point of the story that I just ruined for you. So I hope I didn't do that. I don't think I did. But I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll probably make another one in 2025. Love you. Comment something you want to see next year. Happy New Year. Happy Christmas. Happy holidays.